playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called persuasion.
There are the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
What does rich mean?
Stories and wisdom.
Welcome to the Stories and Wisdom podcast. Today we are joined by Lori Heinel, Global Chief Investment Officer at State Street Investment Management, one of the world's largest asset managers. Lori oversees investment strategy across equities, fixed income, and multi-asset portfolio, helping guide trillions of dollars in client assets. I know Lori as a Tepper alum. We've served on the boards, but she's also one of our top alumni in terms of the time that she gives and the mentoring that she provides to her students. Welcome to the podcast, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
So to get us started, for people who might not know what your day-to-day role would be, how do you describe being a global CIO is?
Well, I think it's a very eclectic role, which is one of the things I love about it. So obviously, as Chief Investment Officer, I need to be aware of what's going on in markets, and I'm often called upon to talk to clients about investment strategies and how they can maximize their return or manage their risk or things of that dimension. But it's also a role where I operate at more of an executive level and helping to guide the broader firm strategy. It's also a role where I'm often recruiting or mentoring or coaching team members. I might be dealing with regulatory bodies. I might be troubleshooting a problem that we have. I might be dealing with risk management, and the list goes on and on and on. So it really is a role where at its core, my team does deliver investment capabilities, but a lot more goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in India, we have these goddesses who have like 10 different arms holding different tools and different...
I wish. I wish I had 10 more hours in the day. Maybe that would be more valuable than the extra 8 arms, but I understand that motif. Yeah,
I'm just giving a visual for what a global CIO could look like
exactly.
based on your description.
Exactly.
Let's actually jump into our first segment. It's called Memoir Moment. So if you had a chance to revisit an early story that you want to share that shaped you, an origin story, so to speak, is there a story that you would like to share about what has put you on path to where you're currently at?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would take it back to when I first went to college. So the first thing that I would say is I was the first in my family to actually go to college. So my father was a coal miner. My mom was more or less a stay-at-home mom, and we really were more of a blue-collar family living outside of Pittsburgh. And I had the opportunity to go to Princeton. And so, of course, when I arrived at school, most people thought I would go into engineering, which at the time was kind of the hot dot, and I'd always been good in math. And so that was the kind of obvious trajectory for me at that point in time. But I got into a class that was religious studies, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of those classes that talked about the history of religion, how religion has influence over culture, has influence over history, and that idea of exploring what might drive people to do very extreme things in the name of religion was something that was sort of drawn to. And it was sort of at a time also where there were some relatives in my family who were pursuing some extreme religious postures. And so again, it had a personal connection. And ultimately, it was a fantastic course of study because it enabled me to be very multidisciplinary, enabled me to kind of think and communicate and write. And it also enabled me to get inside of other viewpoints and not be precious about just my own viewpoint. And kind of throughout my career, I've really valued that ability to see things from other perspectives.
It's fascinating. Like you talk about religion, but really you're talking about empathy and then understanding different dimensions, cross-disciplinary, and you're talking about leadership, just starting with a certain language or a discipline. And how you described also your current role was pretty much with the same set of veneer, which asked me to this next question. What was the origin story for the pivot at which you suddenly got into finance? And then you have thrived there clearly.
Yeah. Well, the short answer is I got to the end of my career in college, and I had an inflection point again. I thought I might want to go to law school because what do you do with a religious studies degree when you don't want to be a minister or a priest or whatever? And law school seemed to be the natural next path. But there was one really big problem. I needed to make some money. I had taken out quite a lot of loans when I was in college, and it was just necessary for me to start to get on a path and make some money. So I ended up in one of the analyst programs at what was then the First Boston Corporation, of course, now part of UBS. And as an analyst, I was cast into this role where I was just providing a lot of analytical support to help solve client problems. And I worked in more or less the investment banking arm for the First Boston Corporation. And that was a kind of interesting exposure. I couldn't even describe to most of my family what I did. The best I could come up with is I'm a banker. Like they sort of understood what bankers did. They had no idea what investment bankers did. But I found very early on that I had a propensity to, listen to what was going on and absorb it. And I did have the analytical toolkit to help solve the problems. And I just got the bug and decided that this was an industry that I wanted to build a career in.
This is awesome. I see this because when I went to grad school at Carnegie Mellon, in first year, one of the first decisions I made was like, I'm going to learn the people who love finance and not take the courses and just get their phone numbers and be best friends with them. Because I knew this was very strong and this is not my thing. And then since then, I still have those relationships that we've made to get there. But to see somebody who did not have the tool set, but then actually built their tool set and thrived, shows a narrative in terms of like, if you start figuring out what you're trying to solve for, all the skills you can build, the industry that you did not have any background in could be yours. It's a very inspiring story when you start talking about it that way in terms of how you started, your inflection point, and where you're at. So I'm very excited about that one. Our next segment is Decision Do-Over. I want you to reflect on a choice that, looking back with hindsight, you would do a do-over on. What would that be?
There are so many, I guess, is the short answer. But I would preface that by saying my general philosophy on life and business is that rarely is there only one path. And so I tend to be of the mind that making no decision is oftentimes more damaging than making a decision that ultimately turns out to not be the best decision to be made. So I'm pretty fortunate, I guess, in the sense that I can sort of let go of things that maybe didn't work out so well and focus then on what did I do to pivot to make them right, or how did I learn from that situation and move forward. But I would say there are a couple of maybe threads here that are valuable. First and foremost, I tend to be, as I said, more of a take action versus debate things to death. And what that means, though, is sometimes I don't take the time to bring people along on the journey. And so there have been lots of situations in my career where I might have had the right objective, I might have had the right plan, I might have been able to personally do a big chunk of it, but it didn't go as smoothly as it could have gone, in part because I did not bring all the other people along that needed to sort of contribute to that in a way that helped them understand the why and the how, and the how valued they were in the process. So I think if there's one thing I've tried to work on really hard as a leader is how my style of doing things has implications for others, because I tend to think, oh, let's just all go take that hill. And oftentimes, while people might be willing to do that for you because you're their boss, or you're leading the project or whatever, they won't give their best effort, and it'll be a lot more difficult. You'll go back and re-adjudicate all kinds of decisions if you don't take that time up front to kind of help people come along the journey.
Your story absolutely relates with me as well. But I like to build, I like to create. And there's always the sense of action to like, what are we building? What are we doing? What are we, drawing or sketching or trying or experimenting? And the pause, let's figure out what the scientific method is, or the fundamentals we're going after, or the data that we need or trying to solve for, is something we do engage on. But to bring in the people who are debating and wants to engage in debate and pull them towards, okay, let's move forward. It is a balance, right? So how have you gotten better at that one?
Yeah, well, I think there are two things that I try to do a better job of. And I hinted at this already. One is the why. because sometimes people need to have a better understanding of why that decision was made. And especially if they've not had the benefit of all the information that perhaps the leadership has had to go through the decision making process and think about the pros and the cons and the alternatives that might be available. So, helping them to understand the why. And then I think the other really critical thing that, again, I would say I still don't do as well as I should is what's in it for them? Because oftentimes we're asking people to do extra work. We're asking people to give up something that they hold dear. We're asking people to change behaviors. We're asking people to, step up in ways that are going to be perhaps uncomfortable for them. And some people are like me, they'll just maybe take that leap and jump. But even I, in many situations, want to know what's in it for me. What's it going to mean for how I'm going to have to behave differently in the future? Ultimately, what am I giving up? And you have to appreciate that people need the space to process some of that. So I think this idea of, okay, you can come in and you can demand a lot and you can push, and ultimately you might get people to get to the end game a few times because they just feel, okay, that's their job, or you were kind of forcing that matter. But if you get them to understand why and to be bought in and to really see how this is going to make their lives better and how it's going to enable them to be more successful and ultimately serve their clients better, then you have a magical moment.
I want to put it with the context. Let's say there is a burning bridge, and this could be, one of the financial downturns or anything. Like we could have taken the pandemic, we can take the 2009, can also even go all the way with 9/11. But let's say take something a bit more recent. So when there is something that is a crisis or a downturn, and then there's a motion for like we need to move fast with a direction, then pausing to get everybody on board again is now a tension that is beginning to introduce. And we've been through this, and I want to have you talk us through, has that gotten better for you? And then therefore, what would you say would be for newer leaders coming on board to say, when the downturn happens, because these are cyclical things, here's a way in which it might be better for them and for them to figure out.
Yeah. Look, I do think there is situational leadership, and some of my best mentors over the years have encouraged me to flex my style more, to appreciate what kind of moment I'm in and exercise that flexibility to be able to be a better leader given the demands of the moment, right? And what I've found often throughout my career is that in the crisis modes, people just act. It doesn't take as much in some respects because everybody can see that the building is burning, and their natural first instinct is to put that fire out, make sure everybody's out of that building safely, and that we're triaging whatever needs to be triaged. And I've worked at many different firms over the years, and some are better at that than others for sure. But a characteristic that I think transcends every place that I've ever worked is people are pretty good in the crisis moment. I think the trickier ones are when there is a burning platform, but people don't even realize the house is on fire yet, right? So maybe as leaders, we see evolution in the industry, we see competitive threat, we see opportunities that we're missing out on. But the average employee, or the rest of the folks around us, are like, well, wait a minute, our revenues keep going up every year, our clients are happy. Why are we doing this thing? But oftentimes, that's the moment when you need to help people see the bigger picture and bring them along a bit more. So I think there's a leadership style and or that taking that more time. And honestly, you typically have more time in those scenarios. You don't have years because if it's a competitive threat, you might have months or a couple of years. You don't have a decade, but you certainly have more than a day or two. And so you can take that opportunity to really bring people along.
Brilliant. This gets us to our next segment. Our next segment is called Vision Venture. Connecting from our previous segment, let's talk about something that might have sneaked up on us, but for people in the know, we've been working on it for decades. or even a sense of, well, the status quo is still good. Let's talk about AI. In that context, what does Vision Venture look for you and how you see that helping or accelerating a few things or disrupting many other things?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I would say is that we are very much embracing AI in all its many forms. And it's been, I think, eye opening for a lot of people around the organization just how many ways they can leverage this technology to do things better, faster, cheaper, higher quality, free up time, all those good things. The other side of it is we work in a very heavily regulated industry and we've got very sensitive information about our clients. And so being able to leverage these tools and these technologies in a way that helps us become better, faster, cheaper, but also respects that regulatory framework and that governance framework and that sensitivity is absolutely table stakes. So everything that we work through in terms of deploying AI, we've got to think about what are the risks attached to that? And some things are very simple. So even when I was preparing for this podcast, I could go into our AI tool and sort of type in the questions and say, hey, what should I say about this? And it'll quickly go back through all of my project plans and all of my emails and give me some ideas, right? So that's a pretty low risk use case. But when we have other things where perhaps we're identifying signals that we might put into an investment capability and that might drive long-term risk and reward in a strategy, that's a very different thing. And then if you go a step further and you want to do things that impact clients or their assets or information about them, that's a different thing still. So I think the AI journey is really all about keeping your eye on there is a long game here where these are going to be highly, leverageable tools, but being smart about how you roll out the different use cases. And then, oh, by the way, there's a whole other vector around how they all tie together. So I think that's where we spend a lot of our energy as well.
So let's try to connect what we were talking about before, which was people, leadership. And then what we've been currently talking about is a fast moving technology that is actually giving you quality at a different level, at a speed that was unseen before, and combine them. Like, what does leadership or the next generation of leadership feel like with this technology? And how do teams or even new leaders start to see this?
So I think leadership is always and ever more the ability to really inspire people to do great things together, right? So it's that simple and that profound and that hard, right? So the way that I think about how AI dovetails into that is how do you inspire people to adopt this technology to do things in different ways, to do greater things than they might have thought possible? How do you help them grow as individuals and as professionals to do other things that bring their unique insights or their judgment or the human element that can't be replicated, certainly not today, and I don't think in the near future at all, by these technologies. So you need creativity, you need empathy, you need people who can move from perhaps doing routine tasks to doing higher order thinking. So one of the things I spend most of my time on in this particular vein is thinking about the human elements of this and what it means in terms of who we're hiring, what we're asking them to do, how we're empowering them to leverage the technology in ways that free them up to actually have a bigger impact on the business in ways that they would never have had the time or space to even think about, let alone actually execute against. So to me, that's where it ultimately comes together.
So in many ways, it's like the song from The Who. It's something new, but then it's similar to the what was there before. The fundamentals are still the same.
Yeah.
It's AI, so we have to get it right by being more flexible and empathetic
Yeah.
and bring people along.
Absolutely. And I think this is another one where you're going to have some individuals who will be instantly comfortable and they'll be the first movers, first adopters, and they'll go in and they'll play around and they won't be put off by the governance and the oversight. They won't be put off by any of the hallucinations or any other things they get back because they're naturally predisposed to adopting, being early adopters. And you have this in any kind of technology, right? And then you might have other people, and I'll admit I'm in this camp, that aren't the earliest adopters, but I can kind of see the potential. And so I want to figure out how to use it and maybe have people give me some shortcuts and help pave the way for me. And so I'm in that maybe belly of the curve of the people who are going to benefit from it, but aren't necessarily up on the tip of the spear. And then you'll have some people that'll just really struggle. And so, again, finding ways to bring them along on the journey as well. So, one of the things that we've been doing is identifying sort of power users throughout the organization who are willing to, be the sort of guides or teachers of other colleagues to brainstorm on ways to deploy this technology and make it very personalized, that kind of engagement and training and learning so that folks don't feel so intimidated.
Yeah, I mean, you almost use technology as a bonding or a team building moment
Yes,
is what
yes,
you're
absolutely.
engaging on. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Let's jump into our next segment, which is called Puzzle Point. So in Puzzle Point, this is about you bringing in a gnarly puzzle. Could be, again, a personal puzzle or what we've already been talking about. But to talk about the different points, the different edges to it, introduce that, and then see which ones, are clearer now for you, which ones are not. And the goal of this section largely is to show that like even experts or subject matter experts in certain areas still are figuring out many parts, which means their puzzles, not all of them have to be perfectly clear for us to attack them or embrace them. So what is the puzzle point you want to bring into this section?
Again, there's so many, and certainly AI is an obvious one, right? Because this tension between moving fast and deploying these technologies in ways that are really accretive to the business, but also ensuring that we're client aware, that we're regulatory aware, that we're risk aware. So that's one, and we sort of talked about that already. So maybe the other one that I'll use is as investors, we have long focused on the asset management or the investment management part of what needs to happen for our clients. But increasingly, our clients' needs are so much more complicated than that. So, take one simple example. If you've got a retiree who's been accumulating in their 401k plan for 20, 30, 40 years, and suddenly they retire and they now move into what we affectionately call the decumulation phase, right? They're spending down that balance that they've accumulated over many, many hardworking years. And now they've got issues around how much can I spend before I run out of money? Do I have to worry about outliving my money completely? There are other types of instruments, things like annuities. How do I think about whether that's the kind of investment that might be appropriate for me? And oh, by the way, a lot of this is very cumbersome. These are individuals who were able to do this through their workplace where it happens sort of behind the scenes automatically. And now they're thrust into a position where they have to manage it from a operational standpoint as well. So that's just one simple example, but I think there are lots and lots of examples about how our industry is going to have to adapt to think much more holistic about what problems we're trying to solve. Another really big one right now is how do you deploy alternatives to a lot of individual investors and private clients? So alternatives, you think about things like private equity, private real estate, distressed debt, infrastructure. These are instruments that for many, many years were almost solely available only to institutional investors or very, very, very high net worth investors. And now we're trying to bring some of those capabilities to investors with much smaller asset sizes because they can actually add a lot of value. But they may have different risks attached. They might be less liquid. They might have more volatility. They might actually have the opportunity to lose money even more than a public instrument. So trying to wrestle through how to do that in a way that's appropriate for the clients that we're serving is something that we work on all the time here.
The other parts that I wanted to actually ask you around, and this has been a debate that's been going on for the last, I would say about a decade or a couple, is balancing fiduciary responsibility with social impact and even environmental. And with the context of even AI or other technologies where certain pockets are going to accelerate very quickly in a faster feedback loop in terms of creation and therefore usage. How does this balance that we were having conversations around, CSR start to get more important, or how does that play in from your perspective?
So I think there are a couple of really important points here. Number one is that there are certain kinds of sustainability issues that are material to companies. And so companies should be thinking that through. So if you think about a physical plant that is in a place that's more prone to an extreme weather event, if that company management's not thinking about that and what it means for their supply chains or what it means for their ability to produce whatever they produce, then that would be a problem, right? So we have long been looking at sustainability issues that are material to a company and asking those companies how they're kind of disclosing those risks to investors because investors need to have that information, or ask them how they're integrating those considerations into their decision making and their strategy. So that's sort of table stakes. That's no different than, accounting, like looking at what a company chooses in terms of complying with GAAP accounting or things of that nature. So that's really, I think, become more or less mainstream. The other side of it, though, is we serve clients. So oftentimes this is not our money. In fact, all the time, this is not our money. It's our clients' money, and we invest on their behalf. So the other really important thing that we've done is make sure that we can honor our clients' sustainability preferences. So we do have clients in many parts of the world who prioritize sustainable outcomes alongside the investment outcomes. And we will do things in the portfolio that take advantage of ways to deliver sustainability and investments and do so in a way that balances those risks and balances those returns unique to that client's perspective. We also have enabled clients to choose voting options because one of the things that we do as a fiduciary is we have to vote shares of our clients' money through their, the funds that they invest in or things of that nature. But we now have something which we call investor voting choice, where we've enabled investors to choose voting schemas that might align with their own sustainability objectives or other objectives for that matter. So I think the way we balance the fiduciary risk is, on the one hand, ever more and always looking at those things that might drive risk and return for a company and therefore in its stock or its bonds. But then secondly, honoring our clients' journeys and supporting them in their own endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, customer centricity is even there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go on to our last segment, Lori. This is our lightning round, and this is literally, it's called This or That, and this will be our Lori edition. First one, short-term gains or long-term vision?
Long-term vision. I have been burned by short-term gains way too many times in my life.
Quant models or human judgment?
Human judgment.
As much as we are temporal alums, we both would choose the
I
days.
know. Because honestly, the quant models require human judgment. So at least today, we don't have generative AI that's writing it all without any human intervention. So I
Yes.
think at the end of the day, you have to have some intuition that underlies your decision-making process.
Because even in the story you were describing, it's about where the clients wants to go. Even if the
Yes.
quant models are moving somewhere else, if the clients want us to go there because that is how they want to lead their lives, we
Yeah.
make a judgment.
We do indeed.
So I absolutely see that. Global resilience or local impact?
Ooh, local impact.
Risk management or bold conviction?
Bold conviction. And I am a big believer that those are not mutually exclusive at all. In fact, the highest conviction ideas often are the low risk because you can execute against them very, very well.
The last one I have for you, sustainable impact or shareholder value?
Shareholder value. At the end of the day, I'm an investor at heart, and my job is to deliver the best outcomes that I possibly can. And that means that ultimately I have to prioritize that.
Awesome. Lori, thank you for joining us on the Stories and Wisdom podcast and sharing your perspective. And for listeners who are actually following your work, where can they find you?
Well, they can certainly go to statestreetinvestmentmanagement.com.
Absolutely. And I must thank you again for being on the podcast, for your energy, but also clarity in terms of the leadership in the industry, that it's not just about numbers, it's about the vision, stewardship, it's about the people, and a lot of human judgment as we also closed out. So thank you for bringing all of that to our perspectives, to our listeners. To everyone listening, we'll be back soon with more stories, more questions, and more wisdom.
Playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called persuasion.
They're the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
Real deep pink.
That was a very different level of inequity.
What does rich mean?